So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Cirrus Logic, not so much because I think you care, but because it'll give you a good backdrop on what we're doing and why we're doing it. In a nutshell, think of what Mike and Ray said about Atmel, and we're sort of the opposite. We're very focused, we're very narrow. There's a handful of product lines and a handful of customers that we're focused on. So we are a little bit the polar opposite of Atmel. As Yisham said, we are growing rapidly. I'll show you some numbers in a second. We have not quite doubled in employee count like Model N has, but we're not far from it. We've gone from about 400 employees 2 or 3 years ago to this number is already obsolete. We're probably close to 700 employees now. And we are continuing to hire every mixed signal analog engineer that can spell Austin, Texas. So if you know any, send them our way. We have lots of IP, very strong patent positions. We have a very strong balance sheet, lots of money in the bank. And we're 100% proprietary. That's one of the important things about who we are and why we do what we do. We don't have a commodity product line. We don't compete at the buyer's desk for orders. We are all about the next design win in our chosen markets and our chosen customers. So here's our revenue growth. It's a pretty big ramp. It's a pretty impressive number. It's been a bit of a rocket ride. What I would tell you is probably and many of you already know this, the worst kept secret probably in the semiconductor industry is who our largest customer is. We do not say the name out loud, and you can try to trick me, but I'm going to try really hard not to say the name out loud. What I will tell you is in recent quarters, most of the growth you see here comes from that number one customer. So we have a small army of people supporting that number one customer, but there's another small army of people, and that's the army that I belong to, whose charter it is to grow the rest of the business. And so what I'm going to cover today has nothing to do with our number one customer. It has everything to do with the rest of our business that we refer to as our core business. So our vision is, as it says here, we want to be the number one choice in, what it doesn't say here actually is signal processing and mixed signal analog components. And we are very focused on large customers. We have a handful of markets that we focus on, and we want to deeply engage with the leading customers in those markets. These are the markets we address. The ones that we are very focused on are the two that are highlighted here. Portable audio has driven our growth with our number one customer and others. And that's where we're obviously growing the most, but it's also where we're investing the most. The other one is the digital energy space, so smart metering, energy measurement, the whole green power initiative is a big area. That's been a legacy product line for us. It continues to be one that we're focused on. LED lighting is a new space that we're in, so if you look above your head and think of all the incandescent bulbs that are in the world today that have to be replaced by solid state lighting, we're a player in that market. We're a new entrant to that market, but it's going to be a big growth area for us and lots of investment. And then digital motor control, brushless DC motor control products is going to be another focus. And the common thread through all of this is our mixed signal technology, our signal processing technology, and a core space where we think we can help our customers differentiate in their markets in a meaningful way. The rest of the stuff here, we make selective investments. We're growing in some of these spaces, not in others, but these are the legacy product lines that Cirrus has had. So I want to talk a little bit about alignment. The topic that Hanan asked me to talk about was our design win program, but fundamental to that whole thing is getting aligned. You can focus on design wins all day long, but if you're focused on the wrong design wins, you're not going to get very far with it. So sort of a generic view of mission, vision, goals, strategy, and all that. But the takeaway to this is if you look at our vision statement here, it drives our sales strategy, which drives things like our resource deployment. Mike and Ray talked a lot about that. It's common sense, but what we've tried to do is to keep it really simple. So, we've chosen this strategy. The benefit to us with our strategy is it's not complicated. It's, again, a handful of markets, a relatively small number of customers. So what we've tried to do is resource the sales organization in a way that makes sense and put in compensation plans and sales metrics that are simply geared to measuring how well we're executing to our strategy. One of the things we've done, and again, Mike and Ray talked about this, is tiering our accounts. So again, in each of these markets, we know who the leading customers are. It's not necessarily the biggest customers that we're after, and we've gone a fairly rigorous process that we've put ourselves through on how to decide who we approach to be these most important customers. And that's what I want to talk about here. I'll spend a little bit of time on this. I've blanked out all the information in here, and it's not important what the information is, but on this slide you can see we've got 3 tiers of customers. There's a 4th, which is the geographic rest of world. So we have a very small number of strategic accounts. That's our top tier. A slightly larger number of key accounts, and a fairly good number of target accounts that we would consider to be sort of the bench strength of guys that we think can become big customers for us. Strategic and key we don't think of very differently. We think of them on the same playing field, and those are essentially treated across the corporation as must-win accounts. So we will do whatever we need to do to be successful with those accounts, within the bounds of the law. But what you would see if I had filled in this matrix is how we think about these accounts and how they are viewed in their market. Are they leaders in their market? Are they able to engage in a meaningful way with Cirrus? Are we able to, or are they willing to engage specifically with us? We have an entire section of how we would call on the account. So we have some guidelines that we set for ourselves on how we'll engage with the customer, how we'll cover the customer from a sales and a marketing and applications point of view, and then the business terms that go along with that. So we try really hard to adhere to this. We're not religious about it, but we do force ourselves to think about this at a somewhat strategic level. We try to look at this formally once a year. We try not to look at it every month, but sometimes we do, typically on the target accounts. But when we think about this, again, for these SKT, strategic key and target accounts, by focusing on these guys, what it allows us to do is just keep the metrics pretty simple. And at the end of the day, if you're 100% proprietary, we live and die by our design wins. And if we do a good job at design wins, the revenue will happen. We actually have a bit of a unique view. Probably it's the only public company I've ever worked for where at the end of the quarter we have the same daily revenue review as everybody else. But it's not so much about how are we going to hit our number, it's how are we going to make sure the customer gets what they need at the end of the quarter, because it does tend to get crazy for other reasons. And we don't have this mad dash for the end of the quarter to make a number. We kind of view our number as mostly predestined. By the time we win or lose the design, we're subject to how successful our customer is in their market, in launching their products, how the economy's doing. We don't have a lot of influence in next quarter's number, or specifically this quarter's number. So we try really hard not to worry about it. We certainly don't incentivize anybody on it. So switch gears a little bit and talk about systems. Back in the day, I've been with Cirrus about 5 years, and when I joined, this is what our sort of system landscape looked like. We had a tool called PartnerFlow. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. It was our opportunity database and quote system, completely standalone. By the time I got there, I think it hadn't been supported in 2 years. So it was destined for the dumpster, and Model N came in, and the initial implementation of Model N was to replace that. We've been an SAP house. At the time, it was ECC only for all the ERP kinds of stuff that you all use it for. We used Adexa for forecasting. Again, a standalone system. We used a system called Issue Tracker, which was a open source case management tool. But these systems were completely disconnected. And our real ERP back in those days was Excel. And we used to pour data out of all these systems into spreadsheets and pivots and have competitions for who could have the biggest spreadsheet on their laptop. But that's really how we managed the business. And this was, again, back in 2008. The revenue chart I showed you didn't go back that far, but right around there is where the ramp started. One of the very first quarters that I was with Cirrus, we had a $35 million quarter, sort of during the economic downturn. And right around here is where we were managing on spreadsheets as that sort of ramp began in earnest. So we began to invest with the Model N deployment back in calendar 2008. And this is what we look like today. So we've implemented Model N pretty widely, again, very similar to what Atmel has done, similar kinds of modules that we're using. We use pretty much everything except, I think, forecasting, sampling, and inventory, although we'll be moving to the 8.3 platform in a few months, and we'll be implementing inventory at that point. Model N is our system of record for customer master data. We've expanded our use of SAP into the business warehouse and into the APO forecasting module. SAP is our system of record for product master data. Down on the bottom right, we've thrown issue tracker out, and we've bought a system from Atlassian called Jira. It's a well-supported web-based case management tool. And down in the bottom left is what we did instead of a CRM. We don't use Salesforce.com. It was a sledgehammer to pound a very small nail into a 2x4. So we went out and partnered with a company called Jive Software, which is they describe themselves as a social business software, which I think is a horrible name. But you can think of it, it's a bad metaphor, but Facebook for business with enterprise security. It's a very collaborative kind of tool. And what we did with that was we built an account management system out of that for our most important customers. That system is now being deployed across the rest of the company with lots of other stuff that we want to do that you would typically think of with any kind of collaborative tool. And in the SAP Business Warehouse is where we pour all this data. So we've got this one common data architecture that we've built that, again, much like what Mike and Ray have said earlier, gives us this common language that we can speak across the whole company. So the days of arguing over whose numbers are right and whose numbers are wrong are long since over. And we've got the ability to turn some pretty powerful reports around to management when they ask for it. Our daily reports are much better than they've ever been before. So Hanan asked me to throw a couple of screenshots in here. So account management, I don't think we do anything really unique here. We have our sales orgs has 3 levels. It's geo, region, territory. Each account, the channel org has 3 levels as well. It's the distributor type, so it's either POS or POP. We collect POS information in Model N for both types of distributors, whether we do revenue recognition off them or not. From a channel management point of view, we pour all the POS data into Model N. So that type is what helps us distinguish between the two. And then the distributor and the branch codes. Each account is associated to one org and one or more channels, probably just like the rest of you. Here's where we start to get serious about the differentiation. Each account in Model N has a tier. You can see it down sort of towards the bottom left there. Tier 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and every every customer location has a tier. The tiering it lives in Model N. It's the system of record for tiering, but we use it across the entire corporation. There's not well, I shouldn't say there's not a person. There shouldn't be a person within the company who doesn't understand when a problem comes up at a tier 1 or tier 2 account, job 1 is go fix it. And I think it's pretty common knowledge across our support organizations, our quality organization, our finance organization, supply chain organization. When a tier 2 problem happens, it gets the big red alarm bell going off, and it's all hands on deck to go fix it. So it's much, much more about messaging than it is anything else across the company. The way we manage opportunities, again, fairly generic. I won't read all the bullets. You can sort of read through them, but we don't require opportunities to be approved. We do require registrations to be approved. We've got some guidelines on size of opportunities, but they're not mandated. We have this notion that came with my boss, Tim Turk from Cyprus, called a QDW, a Quality Design Win. Kind of an arbitrary number. It says if it's $50,000, it's more important than if it's not $50,000. In hindsight, that should probably be a lot bigger now than it was 5 years ago. We do negotiate rep splits among RSMs. We pay our reps directly out of Model N, so that the battle goes back and forth on what the splits are going to be. But we make sure we manage it inside the system so that our reps are paid directly out of Model N. And what I would have held 2 years ago if I was here is that we pay our reps in less than 30 days after month end, because we use the commissions module, and we were able to adapt our needs to the sort of out-of-the-box functionality. And most of our reps tend to love us for that. They don't love us for all reasons. This is how we think of our sales funnel. Like everybody else, we have stages of the sales funnel. The green shaded section there is what we consider to be our active sales funnel. So once an opportunity reaches what we call qualified stage, it goes into our sales funnel and we start modeling revenue based on it. So we start to predict revenue based on what's in the sales funnel. Cleanliness of data is huge. One of the reasons our reps don't love us is because we're constantly reminding them of the importance of the cleanliness of the data. We derate opportunities in terms of predicting future revenue based on their stage in the funnel. So the earlier the stage of the opportunity, the more we derate the opportunity as we try to predict that revenue. And as it gets to design commit, it's derated a lot less and we've got fairly strict rules on how to move an opportunity through the funnel. The salespeople decide how to move the opportunity through the funnel. The marketing guys tend to be the conscience, and they will challenge from time to time in regular ongoing account reviews. We have this notion of terminal stages, so the design win process, which is kind of what I'm here to talk about, is a little bit automated. We have a business warehouse, and I'll describe this on a later slide, where all of our revenue gets poured into Model N, or into the business warehouse rather. And when it reaches our thresholds, we kind of trigger it automatically, set the op to a design win stage. And it's terminal in that stage. Now you can no longer edit the sales funnel stage. If it reaches $50,000, we call that a production win. And what we're looking for here, and I'll kind of jump to the end and come back, we're looking here at a better way to model what we're looking at in the future. Do we have enough in the sales funnel to grow at the rate we want to grow, either in an account or in a territory or as a company? So by derating the opportunities, being religious about keeping the data clean, and looking at these conversion rates, which is one of the things we've started to do, we can get a pretty good idea of are we in a good place in our sales funnel or not. We have a registration program like all of you. Probably doesn't look all that different. We put it in 4 boxes. We like to reward our distributors when they bring us value and when they work hard. So if they bring us a lot of value and they work really hard, we call that a full demand creation registration. If they pick up the phone, take an order, place an order on us and ship it, we call that spot fulfillment. We have margin models that tie into each of these boxes. The margins are different around the world, probably not that different than what you folks are doing. We tried really hard to not customize Model N. That's actually been a theme I hadn't really ever noticed until this RAINMAKER and EAB yesterday. Lots of you said the same thing. Mike and Ray, you guys didn't say the same thing. I think you guys have done a lot of customizations. But we've tried really hard not to. We have a relatively small group. We were still #1 customer side, a pretty small company. So we don't have huge staff to manage all of this. And we tried to stick with configurations as much as we could. Having said that, there are a handful that we've done, and in summary, I wanted to show you what some of them are here. So we've got a header drop-down called reference design. Reference designs are a big deal in some of our markets. We want that opportunity in Model N, but we don't want to count it in our sales funnel. So we kind of flag it as a reference design here. It's reportable. We have this notion of a war board. So when the product lines are getting ready to launch a new product, what we want them to do is identify potential lead customers. If there isn't a signed up lead customer for one of our catalog products that we may be launching, who are the 10 customers that, in the marketing guy's view, should be the 10 most likely adopters for that product? So we'll create a war board opportunity in Model N. And again, it denotes something specific. It goes in as an unqualified opportunity. Once it's in there and the product is in sampling stage, it's up to the sales guys to go off with the marketer's help, qualify the opportunity, take it all the way through the sales funnel, or cancel the op or turn it into a loss, one of the two. We have this demand creation type. So for a distributor registration, it's either full demand creation or shared. We have guidelines on what each of those mean. And then we have the lead number. So we use the Model N leads module. I heard someone at EAB yesterday, Mike, it might have been you, was talking about the number of leads that you push through the system, and it's something like 3 orders of magnitude more than we do. I thought we pushed a lot of leads through at about 2,500 a quarter. That turns out it's not that many. But we try and capture leads systemically. We capture DigiKey and Newark first-time buy reports. Those get loaded as leads. We have customers who hit the website. Those get loaded as leads. Various Marcom campaigns we do, any advertising we do, any sort of electronic bingo card things that we do all get loaded as leads. And we try really hard to do that systemically, so it's not spreadsheet uploads. It is once in a while, but most of the time it's not. And again, what we're looking for here is conversion rates. In an ideal world, 5 years from now, our Marcom VP wants to be able to throw all our revenue out there and look back upstream and see what are the most effective marketing vehicles that she's used over the years. We have this notion called a top op. It's basically a must-win op. So it would be, a lot of these are custom parts that we would do for our very biggest customers in our very biggest markets. Again, it's a messaging thing. Everybody knows if it's a corporate top op, if the marketer gets a phone call to support a guy in the field on a corporate top op, the marketer knows it's recognized by everybody up to our executive staff that this is one we've got to win, so do what you need to do. Same dates probably as you have projected design win and production dates. Project lifetime, one of the things the marketers wanted was, back a few years ago, we had a third product line that we've since sold. And we had, it was a legacy power amplifier product line where their customers' product life cycles were often 20 years. And these, in a lot of cases, were hybrids. So we would go out and buy other people's die and assemble them in a factory in Tucson, Arizona. It was a very weird business model. And then we have other products where the product life cycle of our customers may be 6 months. So, how do you standardize on one number in Model N that's a meaningful number? Well, we decided that number was the estimated annual usage and the dollar value on an annualized basis. And then this becomes the multiplier for the marketers to say, okay, how long is this going to last? We looked at doing it by market segment. That wasn't a clear way to do it because market segments are subjective and not always maintained. So we just decided to take it down to the op level and do it. When we quote, we have a couple of simple rules. No broken prices without an opportunity number. We want to know who the end customer is. We are, as I said, 100% focused on design wins. The ODM or EMS customer is part of the sales channel, part of the fulfillment channel, but we view them as a necessarily evil. We don't put a lot of focus on them. We do what we need to do to support our end customer. So we always want to know who that end customer is. Typically, we'll do pricing on an estimated EAU basis, and we do lots of checks and balances along the way. We've been doing quote and debit compliance for about 4 years now. We've got a very structured program looking at utilization rates, not only on debits, but on the POP distributors. And we've pulled sort of mid-7 digits of direct margin back into the company with that discipline. So it's something we've been doing manually for a while. As we move further in Model N, we'll take more advantage of the capabilities of Model N to automate some of that. The challenge we have is it's really impossible, and you probably already know this, it's pretty impossible to get the linkage between quote and opportunity exactly right every time. If a customer uses a part on multiple programs and in multiple generations of programs, you're going to get this wrong. So we try not to be too anal about it, but we do try to, as best we can, get that right. If the customer is willing to cooperate and give us releases by their project, we will try and track it that way because we're looking for some data here. We're trying to do data mining on our own history here. So the design win validation part of this, most of it is systemic. We've got rules set up in our business warehouse where we get a report kicked out every week showing opportunities with revenue against them. When it reaches our threshold of $1,000 for 1,000 pieces, we call that a design win. It gets, the flag gets set in Model N by the sales ops team in Austin. There will be cases where through DigiKey POS or Avnet Express POS, or just simply quoting an op or quoting the wrong op, there'll be escalations that come in from the field saying, we think this op went to design win, it went through DigiKey, or I quoted the wrong op, and we'll do the validation manually. I don't know what that number is. I think it's probably about 20 to 30% of the opportunities. And it's a mix of the biggest to the smallest, actually. But that's the process that we use, and it's a lot different than it used to be. A year or so ago, a year and a half ago, the process was very manual. It was instituted by the field. They would actually set the design win stage in Model N to design win, and that was the equivalent of them raising their hand saying, I think this one went. And then we would go off and run all kinds of data. We decided to flip that around and run the data first, and we would tell them if it went. They don't have to raise their hand anymore to say, please look. So what we're looking for in all of this, and kind of the key takeaways of the whole thing, I mentioned earlier, we're looking to model what our future revenue is going to be. So the more tightly we can couple all this data and the more accurate we can keep Model N, the better we can measure what the conversion rates are through the sales funnel. And the ones that we really care about are for every dollar we put into the sales funnel, how many design win dollars come out, and for every dollar of design wins that come out, how much revenue do we see? And so we've got a pretty good first pass handle on what all those numbers are. And then the other thing we're looking for, the little arrow that goes back, is how accurately did we predict the value of that opportunity? So the opportunity may be set up as $1 million in Model N. 3.5 years after design win, how much revenue did we actually ship against the opportunity? So again, if you don't get that quote to opportunity linkage exactly right, you're never going to know the exact number. But to a first order, we think we're about 70 to 75% accurate, and we have a pretty good handle on how accurate we are. Now, in this Jive platform that I mentioned, we actually have these dashboards set up. We started doing this about 1.5 years ago. And one of the dashboards that's set up for every one of our biggest accounts is that specific dashboard. So what's our lifetime revenue against every design win that's ever happened for that account? And it makes for some interesting conversations. You know, if I had a $5 million quarter of design wins and 1.5 years has gone by, you'd think I'd have about $5 million worth of revenue. Sometimes I have 1. Sometimes I have 10. So it makes for interesting discussions with the guys. The other thing we're trying to do is go the other way. Start with revenue and swim back upstream and look at the effectiveness of our resource deployment. Do we have people in the right places? You know, we're generating $30 million a year in Singapore. Where did that come from? It came from opportunities in Michigan. Well, we don't have a guy in Michigan. Maybe we should have a guy in Michigan. So we don't have the sophistication that the Atmel folks showed in terms of the mapping. But again, we're smaller and narrower, but we're looking at the same thing. We're all after the same thing. Do we have our resources, first of all, deployed in the right place? And then based on the product lines, do they have the right skill sets? Because again, we have pretty disparate product lines today. They're less disparate than they were 6 months ago, since we sold our 3rd division. But selling an LED driver for a light bulb replacement and a portable DSP with a built-in codec are slightly different sales processes with slightly different skill sets. So looking at this whole resource allocation and do we have the right people with the right skill sets in the right markets is a big deal for us. So I guess in summary, and we can open it up to questions, a couple things I would say in terms of how did we optimize our design win process? We think we have a pretty good one. We can do better. But the most important thing, I think, is get aligned. So, know what you're trying to get accomplished and build all your systems and processes around that. Be really flexible in your systems and processes. Again, I said earlier, we tried really hard not to do a lot of customizations in Model N. That meant we had to adapt our business processes. Again, fortunately, we're smaller. If I were ST or NXP, I probably would have had a harder time with it. And listening to some of their war stories, they did have a harder time with it. But it was really important to us to keep it simple because, again, upgrades are easier. They're less expensive. We can kind of stand alone a little bit easier. So we had to be a little bit more flexible on adapting our own processes to the standard out-of-the-box functionality of Model N and the other systems that we picked. And keep it simple. That's, again, it's a little bit of the don't do too many customizations piece, but it's also in terms of your programs and your metrics and your compensation plans. Our sales compensation plan is revenue, design wins, and MBOs. The MBOs are all around the corporate top ops or the largest dollar opportunities, so they're really a design win MBO. And the revenue MBO, we laugh about it all the time, is more of a feel-good MBO than it is, or a feel-good component of the commission plan than a real one. Because if I go into this quarter with X amount of design wins, my revenue is pretty much predestined. So I really can't influence it that much. So that would be my other suggestion, is just kind of be very cognizant of that and try and keep things simple. And since we're at the Model N Rainmaker, let me close with a couple of comments about Model N. They're at the center of our universe, as they are with most of you that are current customers of Model N. They hold all the most important data. about our future. They don't hold all the revenue data, but the revenue data is historical. The sales funnel data and the customer data is the forward-looking stuff, and that's sort of the family jewels. So they're at the center of everything that we do, and they're certainly at the center of the design win program. I said earlier, our customizations have been pretty simple. We did have a couple of bumps along the road when we deployed in 2008, but I have to tell you, they were hyper responsive to get the problems fixed, and they've been a really solid partner for us over the years. One of the vehicles, or two of the vehicles they offer are the Customer Advisory Board, the Executive Advisory Board. I've been privileged to be a part of both over the years, and they take them seriously. This is a company that, to a person, it's in their DNA to ask customers what they need and to listen to what customers tell them. So I would tell you, from our point of view, they've been a really good partner for Cirrus Logic. And I think that's it. So, any questions?
Is there questions?
Thanks, Dave. What's your, when you're looking at, going from opportunity design win to business win, can you describe a little bit about the process that you guys use to go from design win to business win and what your experience is there?
Say it again, Mike. I didn't hear the whole question.
No, when you go from opportunity to design win to business win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit the process you guys go through to get from design win to business win to revenue?
So the revenue is accumulated daily. So direct revenue is accumulated daily via SAP into our business warehouse. POS gets loaded weekly. There's one day a week, I think it's a Tuesday, if I remember right, this report runs out of SAP Business Warehouse that looks at every opportunity in Model N that is pre-design win, that has revenue, and it'll kick that report out to one of the folks on the sales ops team, who will then go off and validate anything that's over $1,000. That's an automatic design win. They'll go in and they'll flip the flag in Model N to design win. And those reports, not that specifically report, but we have a couple of reports that go out to the field, one of which we call the funnel action report. So it's the Keep Model N Clean report. It's got a couple of tabs on stuff we care about. One of them is pending design wins. And on that report, I believe it actually shows the revenue that's booked against or that's shipped against an opportunity that has not yet gone to design win. So that's a trigger to the field to say, if you think you've shipped $1,000, you need to let us know, and we'll go do some poking around to see if we can find it.
Can you give us a percentage what you guys believe passes that funnel? Is it 10%, 5%?
What percent goes automatic versus manual?
No, to get to revenue, right? Like if you put $1 into the pipeline,
oh, okay.
How much revenue you guys get from that?
How about we take that one offline?
I thought I'd get that answer.
Yeah.
I had to ask though.
Yeah, it's probably not far from what everybody thinks. I mean, the distributors have models, and they'll tell you that 25-30% of registrations go to design wins. It's in that ballpark of what goes to design win. What goes to revenue, you want to be a lot higher, and it is. But again, we think we're only about 70% accurate in what that number is because of the linkage between quotes and opportunities. Yeah.
Dave, you said something that was, if you do the design win, you focus on that. The revenue is then deterministic. But the assumption and the caveat is that the right platform, it's the right customer.
Yep.
Right? So are you using Model N to measure the design win quality, either how much of the opportunities fall out late in the funnel or late in the process? Or do you go back, is there a statistical view you can look at if the guy entered it and said it's $10 million, and in the end, and this is to Mike's question too, in the end it turned out to be $1 million, right? And is there anything in Model N where you could actually use that to be able to, because that's the deterministic, that's part of the deterministic. Right.
Yep.
Value.
So that's actually two-part. Let me take the second one first. So was the opportunity value right in the first place? So we won the design. It takes a long time before you know the answer to that question. And that's that dashboard I was describing. So we have a dashboard that shows 8 quarters of design win dollars and the lifetime revenue for each of those design wins. So if 8 quarters ago I had $1 million of design wins that were validated, 2 years ago, you'd think I'd have about $2 million in revenue. So at a rolled up level, we show that by account. We can show it actually we do show it by territory in this Jive platform that we've built at the sales territory level. So that gives you a pretty good aggregate level, and then you can go down. You can drill into it a little bit if you want to go look at the rest of it. The other question is more interesting, and that's something that, I mean, we do use Model N data. We run the report out of BI because it's pre-formatted, normalized, and it's got a whole bunch of other data attached to it that makes the analysis easier. But we do look at that, and we've just started looking at that analysis for what we call our corporate top ops. And it's very enlightening because it tells you, did you pick the right op? We also look at it, by the way, for warboards. You know, if we thought these were the lead customers for this product, you'd think your conversion rate would be pretty high because in theory, you designed a part for those customers. So we're starting to do some of that now. We don't have a formal process to do it, but we're getting to the point where we're going to have a formal process to do it.
Any other questions?
In the back, Yisham?
Hey, Dave. So you mentioned about the conversion rate. What about the cycle time? So from the time when it was created to, are you measuring that? Do you have the process defined for that?
That is one of the customizations that we did recently. Is Steve Rossellini here? So Steve worked with us a couple of months ago to put timestamp on our sales funnel stages. So every time an opportunity, I forget whether it's reaches or leaves a sales funnel stage, we timestamp it. So it will give us that data in time. We have never looked at it other than initiation to design win, because you have those two dates. But in between, we've just recently, in the last couple of months, had the ability to start tracking that. But that's one of the things we're really interested in looking at, because again, that's another predictor, right? It's another element in the ability to predict revenue, is how long it's going to take to get through the funnel.
Any other questions from the audience? No? Oh, one more from Keith.
No, not Keith.
You know, you said something that really intrigued me, which was that at the end of a quarter, you just let the revenue flow and you don't do any management of your revenue quarter over quarter. Really?
Am I supposed to not say that?
Well, no. I mean, I know. We all do some sort of revenue management, but I was just intrigued because the issue that I face is that...
Careful, your boss is sitting behind you.
Oh, he knows. No, the issue I face is that you assume that the customers, probably through the EMS, really need that product the last week of a quarter versus the first week of the next quarter, the quarter, or maybe the week after that. So you don't look at that, you don't measure that, you don't manage that?
We do look at it. We don't measure it. We do look at it. We do management. That's what I was saying, where we want to make sure we get the customer the product when they need it. If the CM tries to push it out over the quarter boundary, and it's a meaningful number with a meaningful customer, we will validate with the end customer whether that's the right thing to do or not. And if it is, we'll allow the push out. I mean, I spent 4 years at Cypress, and again, to me, it's a little philosophical issue and a little bit of a product mix issue. If you're a commodity guy, you're much more tempted and you're much more able to influence your revenue at the end of the quarter. If you're 100% proprietary, you're less able, unless it's to do foolish things, which is always stealing the next quarter's revenue. And so we make a conscious decision to really not try to do that. And that's the philosophical part. That's from our CEO all the way down.
Right, okay.
And frankly, it's a pleasure, because having lived on the other side for 4 years.